So welcome to the second part of the 9th lecture series. Today we're going to be talking a bit more about activity-based management. And activity-based management is a specific approach to budgeting that is being used in the case, the SPPU case that we're looking at this week. So just as a reminder, if you go back to the budgeting discussion from earlier in the term, you can remember that budgeting is a way of, say, setting priorities and allocating resources in a way that is consistent with those priorities. Activity-based management then is a particular approach to budgeting that we're going to see is often used in organizations that are in some sort of a transition. So again, sort of if we think about a general definition of activity-based management, it is a set of practices that are used in the control and coordination of organizational activity. If you were going to compare it really to any of the sort of levers of control that we saw, say, in Mintzberg, you would think of this as performance management. So this is a way of, in essence, I guess you aren't directly managing performance so much as you're allocating resources in a way that is consistent with performance or desired performance, I guess you could say. So again, it is a particular way of evaluating organizational activity that's based on the activity itself. So I'll give you an example, and we can see that, for example, they aren't putting, they're basically looking at things like sort of the marginal costs of teaching as opposed to sort of overall, say, what a department might need. In the case, I'll give you an example from some university activity-based management. And again, the sort of overall emphasis here is on strategic management, strategic priority setting, and in particular, thinking about activities and outputs and not business units per se. But like any type of sort of relative in the family of a performance management system, it can overemphasize short-run costs and benefits to the exclusion of longer, basically, term investments. So here's an example then of activity-based management that is often being used in higher education. So whenever I was at both Oxford and London School of Economics, both of these universities implemented this, and UMass is even trying a form of this right now in our own budgeting process. In essence, you can think that you need some way to allocate resources, a mechanism that sort of lines up dollars with dollars. So you want student tuition money to be allocated to teaching or research funding to be allocated to research. And of course, what's tricky here is there might be sometimes some times in which you might want to, say, cross-subsidize. So you might want to have some student tuition maybe allocated to research, or you might want to have some research funding going to training. And there have to be ways to sort of try to control, though, these flows of money, because what you don't want to do is have one resource stream generating most of the revenue, but then reallocating it to resource streams sometimes that's not as profitable and might not be where you actually want to be investing from an organizational standpoint. So the current budget process at UMass, and often the sort of historic budget process used at many organizations, is basically based on the org chart or the unit. So it's often a sort of incrementalist budgeting. So, you know, the people in the social behavioral sciences college got, you know, X amount of dollars. Now we're going to give them X plus 2% this year. People over in you know, the utilities group, or the, you know, again, you can look at the operating core, the academic departments, or any other of the departments, and just basically say whatever they got plus X% or minus X% sometimes in the current funding climate. And that's going to be their new budget. Very standard sort of status quo or historical budgeting process. But what you might want to do is say, okay, the problem is that right now, all of our students who used to be taking say, humanities or liberal arts type courses might now be more interested in engineering or computer science courses. So we need some way to reallocate that money. And the problem is, of course, that you don't want to just see, okay, have it sort of seem arbitrary how you reallocate the money. So what will end up happening then instead is that people often use this more of a resource allocation mechanism or activity-based management system that looks at the activity. So let's just now say we've got X amount per undergraduate student, right? You can also do it per master's student if you get more. And we'll give some percentage to sort of the classes where there are bums and seats, and some percentage of that tuition income to the overhead costs of having majors. Because, of course, the costs go beyond teaching. We need advising. We need other types of administration. In fact, the costs go far beyond the sort of direct costs of teaching. So in essence, you need some way of allocating that money and then assigning it to the right departments. What this then allows us to do is basically have a process where each department's, budgeting can be at least in part based on how many student credit hours they're teaching and how many majors they have.